When thinking of the national parks, our mind sends us on a journey to some of the most iconic vistas in America. But below the surface lies an unseen world. These are the cultural and scientific treasures that make up the underwater wonders of the national parks.
So I graduated number 2 in my class. They said, well, Cale, you have your choice of worldwide assignment. Worldwide assignment to a boy from Illinois, where is that? And I remembered there's a little island somewhere about 2,000 miles off the United States called the Territory of Hawaii. And here they have beautiful girls there with hair clear down to their back. I hear even some of them have grass skirts and live in grass shacks. Said, hell, send me to Pearl Harbor.
When the young men stationed at the naval base of Pearl Harbor awoke on the morning of Sunday, December 7th, 1941, they had no way of knowing that their lives would forever change before the day's end. Shortly after daybreak, Japanese forces flew into one of the United States' most vital Navy outposts on the Pacific Ocean. On their arrival, a 90-minute sucker punch left American forces reeling and over 2,400 military personnel and civilians dead. Pearl Harbor is located on the small island of Oahu in Hawaii. Its location on the Pacific Ocean, a pivotal link between Asia and North America, earned it its nickname, the Crossroads of the Pacific. Before the United States entered World War II, the harbor was home to 130 ships of the U.S. Pacific Fleet and was considered by many of the servicemen to be an idyllic paradise. On Sunday, December 7th, that peace would be shattered. Today, visitors flock to this historical and cultural landmark, where at the USS Arizona Memorial, they pay respect to the 1,177 souls who perished alongside the ship. At the monument, standing on top of the battleship's remains, the mood is one of reflection and remembrance. But below the turbid waters of Pearl Harbor, the lives of those who were present on that fateful day remains frozen in time.
The unique thing about working on the Arizona and diving the Arizona is just the history. I mean, you can't escape it. And you can't help but think that you're swimming in a sacred place. You're swimming in a place that you know, so many people lost their lives, and it's still there. It's still a physical touchstone to the past, and the artifacts that were there on the deck in 1941, because of its location and preservation, are still there today.
And here we are in the galley area, just forward of the memorial. This is an area that is kind of devastated, both from the blast, but also from the salvage activity that happened after the war. Here we have a few ceramic bowls. These bowls often remind us of the crew that would have been aboard on that Sunday morning, December 7th, 1941.
The attack, starting shortly before 8 a.m., caught the crew of the USS Arizona completely unprepared, as breakfast and morning activities were just commencing. And while the shipwreck provides a material glimpse into the attack, it is the voice of the survivors who best tell the tale.
As we was walking back from the mess hall, we're carrying our food in our mess kit, and we begin to hear some noises. And we do have a lot of noises, but not on Sunday too much. I started to say, oh, that's one of our planes. But then I heard it again, and the sound of the plane didn't sound right to me. And I looked up there and I said, uh-oh, that's a Japanese plane. And about that time, the pilot, co-pilot, and tail gunner was looking around, and he looked down and saw me, and he brought his machine gun around. When I saw that, I took my mess kit, the breakfast and all, and threw it in the air, and I ran like hell to the barracks. Because I could hear bullets hitting on the ground, on the barracks, on the roof of the barracks.
When I came outside the building, I looked over towards Battleship Row, and what's this? We don't train on Sunday. And I said, my God, those are Japanese planes. They were really well trained. You see, it was actually a surprise attack. It shouldn't have been, though. Shouldn't have been. That was December the 7th, 1941.
So Pearl Harbor today is much the same as it was during World War II. There were many ships in port, all the mainline battleships, Nevada, Arizona, and so forth down the line. Approximately 183 Japanese planes were in the air for the first wave of the attack, which lasted roughly an hour or so. So the main focus of the attack were airplanes in the airfield to neutralize the ability of the United States to strike back at the Japanese.
And when I looked out at the field there, all of our airplanes was just demolished. The hangars were ablaze.
The second targets were the main line battleships along Battleship Row.
They started dropping off aerial torpedoes because they'd been made by the Japanese to go in shallow water.
I saw all the battleships in a terrible way. The battleships in the back were afire, and the Arizona was already engulfed in flames. The sky was just black with smoke.
The USS Arizona was one of 8 U.S. battleships docked at Pearl Harbor, home to roughly 1,400 men, including a father and son, and 38 sets of brothers. The ship measured 600 feet in length, weighed over 37,000 tons, and boasted 4 turrets housing the ship's 14-inch guns. It was one of the most impressive battleships in the Pacific Fleet.
So it was kind of a city gone to sea, is what we like to say. You know, it had things like a barber shop, a cobbler, an ice cream shop.
My orders read USS Arizona. I got there at the deck. I turned around and I looked out. About that time is when I seen there were 4 planes shooting right straight at us. And we didn't think much of that because they usually kind of use us for target practice a lot of times, dropping balloons, balloons full of water on us on a Sunday. But this was not that, because when he turned up, you could see the torpedoes coming straight at us. And within less than 2 minutes, it was all hell had tore loose. But when the Arizona blew up, I was right in the middle of the blow, and I blew clear over the vessel into the water.
Arizona had taken a bomb from up 12,000 feet at 1,500 pounds, and it come down and hit the Arizona, went down 2, 3, 4 steel decks into the ammunition locker and blew up with a giant explosion.
The strength of the blast on the Arizona, compounded by the ignition of the ship's weapon cache, generated a tidal wave, approximately 10 to 15 feet high. Traveling all the way to Ford Island, a distance of almost 300 feet.
The Arizona was struck at least twice, and then with one near miss. The one that damaged the ship struck between turret 1 and turret 2 and detonated the forward magazine. The ship buckled up in the water. It literally spread open like a tin can. You can see the edges of the ship splaying open even today in the wreck.
Here we are in a hatch that's located just beside the number 1 barbette and the number 1 turret. And this hatch is in an area where the most of the devastation occurred on the USS Arizona. So the location that we're in right now actually is compressed. It's 3 different deck levels that have compressed down on each other because of that massive detonation that happened just to forward of us where we are right now. This hatch used to go down into crew's quarters, but all of those quarters and all of those decks were collapsed in on each other. Now, the deck just leads down into sediment.
And in that explosion, there were about 200 fuel cells underneath the vessel that contained over 1 million gallons of fuel on December 7th. And essentially half of those were instantaneously detonated with the TNT. The others began leaking, and it ended up burning while they were still trying to fight fires.
Here we have on the deck a vivid reminder of the destruction on the USS Arizona. Lying here is a coiled fire hose. This fire hose often reminds us of the futile efforts of the men to fight the fires after that blast in the forward powder magazine on USS Arizona.
We were in blackout conditions in those days. Nobody could have any lights on their houses or anything. The only light you could see on the whole island was the burning of the Arizona. Well, it burned for 2.5 days.
Sailors and Marines valiantly fought the fires, while the chaos reigned around them. But the Arizona could not be saved. The ship quickly flooded and settled on the muddy bottom of Pearl Harbor. As the fire rose from the water, military personnel struggled to douse the hellish flames and save their fallen comrades.
But I spent the next 4 hours out there in the water, swimming underwater most of the time because the diesel had leaked out of the ships and caught fire. So I'd have to swim underwater, break water, see somebody to be picked up, go back down under and pick them up. In 4 hours, I picked up only 46 people. Some of them were dead already. Some were badly wounded, some badly burned, some were just tired because they got blown off the ship or jumped off and had to be taken ashore.
As sediment on the wreck's decks is moved by the shifting tides in the harbor, new artifacts continue to reveal themselves to divers.
Here is a boot that looks like it was some type of a work boot. It's artifacts like this that often remind us of the sailors who were on board the ship and the tremendous loss of life after the attack.
I think about the first thing we saw in the Arizona was a bunch of ashes blowing off of the ship. Well, a lot of the men had burned right down to the deck. There were just little piles of ashes because the ship burned so long, so hot. Many of the men were in ashes behind the big guns on the ship. So I just sort of shed a few tears.
Here we are at the bow of the USS Arizona. This is an area called the cutwater. This is where the ship would cut through the water at nearly 20 knots. It's amazing that a ship this size, some 608 feet long, comes to a point where you can actually wrap your hand around the hull. It's inside this hull that nearly 1,000 sailors and Marine are still entombed in the ship after the result of the December 7th, 1941 attack.
The USS Arizona became the final resting place for the 1,177 souls lost on board. But the connection to that particular moment in history also remains deep-rooted in the memory of the survivors, many choosing to be entombed amongst their fallen brothers at arms in the shallow waters of Pearl Harbor.
If you were a USS Arizona survivor and you choose to be interred with your shipmates, you have that right and you have that ability. So what we do in the Park Service and the Navy on a regular basis is, as Arizona survivors die, we actually inter them inside number 4 barbette.
The wall that you see in front of me here is actually the base. It's the barbette of the number 4 guns of the USS Arizona. This is the foundation where the guns would have rested on and rotated around like this. We actually use this line here to follow it down about 20 feet into the ship, and it's there that we place an urn where USS Arizona survivors can have this be their final resting place on the ship.
In the immediate aftermath of the attack, the Arizona faced 2 possible fates. One, advocated by Admiral Chester Nimitz, who would play a key role in World War II as commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, was that the ship be removed from the harbor in an attempt to erase the horrors of the day and to eliminate the risk debris posed to other Navy ships. Alternatively, there were those, like Admiral Arthur Radford, who believed that the ship's remains honored fallen American heroes and served as a reminder to remain ever vigilant. Admiral Radford planted an American flag on the ship's mast to create the first informal memorial. Today, the Arizona's resting place is commemorated by the iconic USS Arizona Monument, constructed over the skeletal remains of the ship in 1962.
I never realized that there was 1,177 men aboard the Arizona. And since I only took off 109, I knew there were other men on the ship, but I never thought about how many it happened to be. Well, when I got out there this time, they had the big white wall with all of the names of the men and Navy men and the Marines that were still on the ship. And I said, my God, I left some 900 men aboard the ship.
The only thing I can say when I look back over it and I see the blast and know where I was, how the hell I ever got out of there, I do not know. It's a miracle as far as I'm concerned.
And I know down below on the ship, there's 900. The spirit is there about that ship. I feel it.
When they have the ceremony on December the 7th each year, all the tears go down my back, and I find myself right back out there.